Thanks again for your patience, everyone. It has definitely been an interesting start to our 2024. I hope that all of you had minimal disruption in our wintry weather. We are taking just a moment here to get ourselves going, having just a little bit of a technical issue, letting folks into the room. But if our team would put up our first slide, we'll begin and get ourselves going. Officially, to all, welcome into the Historic Albina Advisory Board meeting. Today is January 23rd, 24. I can't believe I'm saying 24. I still haven't gotten used to writing it on things, but I appreciate all of you being in the virtual space with us today. Thank you for all of our community members who may be joining us from the public in the virtual space. We appreciate your presence as well. I'm going to take a moment to review our agenda for today. We have an exciting meeting and some things that our technical team have provided to launch us into the next phase of our discovery together. So I'm excited for today. If you would go to the next slide. And the next slide. I think we are all Zoom experts in light of our COVID experience. And so I will dive into our agenda today, introductions, our principles of agreement. We'll have an opportunity for community members to give public comment. Our technical team will be sharing some precedents and possibilities as it relates to the proposed highway cover design. And then there will be an opportunity for the team to give feedback in regards to the things that we heard from Historic Albina Advisory Board members. So this section we're calling We Heard You. There's an opportunity. Our project director is going to give some project updates, our city partners, etc. And then we will move into next steps. Our next slide, please. All right, I will give us a refresher as we dive into all of this wonderful content. Your voice matters. There will be an opportunity for you to engage verbally and electronically today. So we want to hear from you. We trust that you will be authentic and genuine, that there will be a lot of information so that you would listen for understanding. Often in this work that is geared in restoration and passion, we want you to deal with issues and not people. We are going to experience some discomfort as we work through all of these wonderful solutions and some problems. So experience discomfort, but we ask that you would remain respectfully engaged. Have members that can, we would appreciate you to turn on your camera. If you cannot, we do understand that many are preparing even for this evening's PPS board meeting. So thank you for being in the space with us. And then we ask that you would expect and accept non-closure. We won't be able to solve everything today, but we hope that today's meeting will take us one step closer to a better re-envisioned, reimagined Rose Quarter area and project and future for our community. Next slide, please. So I want to share with you all one of the tools we're going to be using in some of our future meetings to engage HAAB members. This is called a Mentimeter. I am new to some of this technology as well, but I want to share with you all that we're going to use it in our upcoming meetings. And HAAB members will be those we're asking to respond to the Mentimeter. And members who are invited into the HAAB space as guests in our upcoming meetings will also have the opportunity to respond. And today we thought we would just do a little teaser, a little dry run, if you will, to get us used to using the Mentimeter. It would be great if you are at a computer. You can also leverage this resource on your phone. You may want to leave the tab open on your devices throughout the meeting, and the same link will work throughout our meeting. We're going to use it once or twice today, and it is a low barrier usage. So don't be worried about technology today. We want to let you know that we'll be utilizing that today. I want to give just one quick reminder before we move into the question. HAAB members, as you well know, we have created a resource for you to help with your work, and those physical binders will be available to you. We had a bit of a delay with the weather and not being able to get our printing done on time and move around safely in the ice and snow, but those are available, and I'll be connecting with each of you to make sure that you have access to that physical copy, as well as the online resource is available to you. So we're going to jump into the fun this afternoon and test out the Mentimeter. So for HAAB members, you would need to go into the chat, and the link would be available for you to participate and to test out one of our engagement tools. So if you would avail yourself into the chat and go to Menti. Folks are already leaning in. If you are snowed in during an ice storm, what is your go-to snack? If HAAB members would respond, we want to know that you have access, that you're able to get in, and that you're having the opportunity to engage. So just a fun tester today. While you were snowed in, I see the answers coming in. Lay's, you can't just eat one. Absolutely. HAAB members, okay. Awesome. I need to be where the apples and caramel sauce are. Indeed. I think we have just a couple more HAAB members. They're coming through. Thank you for your responses. I can't see all of the HAAB members in the room at one time because we have such a large group, but I believe you all have the hang of it. If you are able to keep that browser open and shift back to Zoom, we'll be using it one additional time during our engagement today. So thank you for testing out the Mentimeter, and we will have opportunity to engage verbally as well today. At this point, thank you so much. I'm going to shift and invite our fearless project director, Megan Channel, to provide an update.
Thanks, Erica, and thanks, HAAB, and happy 2024. It's good to see all of you. My project update is going to be a little bit different today. I know today's meeting is going to focus on the important conversation of our highway cover design, really to share information about how the highway cover will be built, the structural considerations, and what it can support, and really just to ensure that we are on the right track and meeting community values, or if we're not, let us know. But before I jump forward into our meeting, my update is actually going to be a step back, just to make sure that as a matter of formality and for a viewing public, that we do a recap of the items that were discussed at our October and December work sessions. So for HAAB members, I know no decisions were made at those work sessions, but again, we'll just be recapping what we previously covered in our work sessions here in our public meeting. So in October, just as a reminder, we did hear from the Assistant Director of the Office of Social Equity and Civil Rights from ODOT, with an overview of ODOT's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. And Assistant Director McAlpin provided data on the DBE contracting, looking at data kind of comparing from 2014 to 2018, as well as 2019 to 2023. Really noting that I'd say the key finding there was that the number of contracts for minority DBEs during those time periods has gone down, but the total number of dollars to minority DBEs has gone up when comparing those time periods. So there were kind of data specific questions from HAAB members, including how DBE numbers compare to non-DBE firms, the type of work that DBEs are being contracted for, trends on the number of Black-owned businesses bidding on government contracts, and then specifically ways in which the agency is helping to improve engagement and focus on mentorship opportunities. And so I know while the HAAB is focused on project design, and we have our Community Oversight Advisory Committee that's focused on the project's DBE and subcontracting program. Just wanted to note that that update at our October work session was provided to be responsive to HAAB interests. So wanted to just give a recap of that. And then two other items covered at the October work session. We shared that ODOT's, the Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant application was submitted to the USDOT. We also shared that at your public HAAB meeting on September 26th and presented that in the September Oregon Transportation Commission meeting. And then at the October session, we also discussed and heard HAAB's feedback really in preparation for the community panel presentation that was made at the November 9th Oregon Transportation Commission meeting. And just want to thank Mr. Modica again for representing the HAAB on that panel and reflecting the priorities from the HAAB at that meeting, and to many of the HAAB members that were there in support and attendance as well. So that's a quick recap of the October work session. I'll do a quick recap of December, noting that our December work session really did focus on initial information related to the highway cover structural design. Much of this information is going to be covered again in today's design portion of the meeting. But at our last work session, the design team provided an overview of the broader Rose Quarter district and kind of identifying and looking at a district level, what are the investments more broadly in the district and work that is done to sort of in collaboration with the highway cover to help achieve a community vision for the area. We also revisited the community priorities from the independent cover assessment process with interest from HAAB members to continue to build and really enhance these. So we'll continue to do that as our work goes forward. There also was an overview of the highway cover capacity, noting areas of the cover that are more suited for larger development opportunities versus lower intensity of uses, namely demonstrating that the edges or the ends of the highway cover can support lower levels of intensity of development, while the central portion has greater capacity to support more development. And so we shared that information along with some cover offset information, specifically offset locations for future buildings on the cover that need to be considered, really related to how close are they to the edge of the cover to accommodate maintenance access and screening, making sure that we're avoiding building across a bridge joint, because those have a tendency to expand and contract. Talking about the geotechnical offsets related to future off-cover building foundations, and kind of starting to scratch the surface on utility considerations. So many HAAB members, you had many specific questions, which were great. And as Erica said, we heard you and those questions that were related to governance and economic analyses and the intersection with the city's broader planning work, requests for additional information on the structural design, which we'll talk about in more detail today, and then a desire for more information related to questions on air quality, and then an update on right-of-way process. So answering those questions will definitely be a focus of today's meeting. And again, we'll continue to provide the highway cover design information, as well as additional background on the design assumptions. So thanks for letting me take that step back and kind of a recap of where we've been and where we're going, focusing on our last two work sessions. And so with that, I think, Erica, we're ready to proceed into tonight's meeting. So I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your giving us a quick overview as we move into the next section of our meeting. At this time, we're going to give an opportunity for members of the public who might have public comment to share with the HAAB board. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Natalie, who will take us through the steps for giving public comment. Natalie?
Thanks, Erica. So members of the public viewing the meeting on the live stream are invited to make a verbal public comment by phone at this time. And if you wish to do so, please dial the phone number shown on the right side of the screen. and enter the meeting ID and passcode shown. It's also in the comments below the YouTube live stream. And after doing so, you'll be placed in a virtual waiting room until your turn to speak. And then when that time comes, we'll invite you to unmute yourself. And speakers will have up to 2 minutes for their comment and will be muted at time. If you'd like to provide more extensive comments to members of the HAAB, please see the options listed on the meeting agenda. And if you are also viewing the live stream while you're making your comment, please remember to mute your speakers to minimize feedback. So with that, I'm checking to see if there are any commenters in the queue, and we do have 2 at this moment. So I'll go ahead and admit our first commenter into the room and give them a moment to get in here. We have Joe Courtwright as our first commenter. So Teresa, if you could please take down your screen, and I will go ahead and share our on-screen timer. And Joe Courtwright, if you'd like to go ahead and speak your comment verbally, let's make sure we can hear you. Are you able to unmute yourself? Joe Courtwright, we cannot hear you. Can you dial *6 to unmute? And I will go ahead and share our on-screen timer. And Joe Courtwright, if you'd like to go ahead and speak your comment verbally, let's make sure we can hear you. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm getting some feedback, but it has ended. So I did hear you just now. I don't know if others are experiencing that. We cannot hear you. Can you dial *6 to unmute?
I'm on the
I will
computer.
go ahead and share our on-screen timer. Oh, it is. I think we're getting some feedback from the YouTube on your computer. Your comment verbally. Let's make sure. Could you please mute your speakers, and we should be able to hear you better. Yes, I'm getting some feedback.
How about
but it
now?
has ended. So I did hear you just now. I don't know if others are still hearing a little bit of feedback there. Dial *6 to unmute.
I'm on the
I will go
computer.
ahead and share our on-screen timer. Oh, it is. I think we're getting some feedback from
Sorry,
the
here, just a second. Sorry, I know what the problem is.
Could you please mute your speakers?
Sure, just a second. Okay, how's that?
Much better, thanks.
Okay, my apologies. And for
No
the record,
worries.
before you start the timer, I was on your August 22nd meeting and waited for 2 hours and was never called on. So I'd like to have my time expanded to 4 minutes if that's possible. I understand you only have 2 people today.
Apologies for that. Yeah, Erica, please.
Indeed. While
Thank
I
you.
appreciate and the trouble, we have a shorter time for public comment today. So if you could limit your comments today to the 2 minutes, Mr. Courtwright, and submit the rest in written form, we would definitely make sure to distribute those to the HAAB members.
I've submitted written testimony. For the record, Joe Courtwright. I want to make 2 main points. First of all, I want to make it clear to you that the process that this project is in danger. It's failing. It's exploding in cost, and it's exploding in cost because of decisions made by ODOT staff. And every step of the way over the last 5 years, ODOT has taken actions that undercut the progress of the Rose Quarter project and instead shifted funding to another project, the Abernathy project. And it's ODOT staff's decisions that have imperiled this project, not anything having to do with tolling. Along the way, ODOT found money for the I-205 project, which the legislature provided no money for, diverted state gas tax funds that were originally earmarked for the Rose Quarter to pay for the 205 project, used Rose Quarter funding to circumvent federal environmental review, accelerated the construction of the 205 project, which put it in line ahead of everything else. And now that project, which was estimated to cost $250 million, is $622 million, and it's all in line ahead of the Rose Quarter. If you are having problems moving this project forward and extraordinary cost because of its huge width, which is really a 10-lane freeway project, as I've documented, that's the reason this project is in danger. It's because of the decisions that ODOT staff has made. The other thing I want to point out is that the Oregon Department of Transportation and your consultants have systematically and repeatedly violated the open meetings law. Your last 2 meetings we found out about in October and December were done in violation of the open meetings law and the charter that you adopted. And right now, the HAAB is the only community advisory group overseeing this project. And it doesn't make sense to have a project that is violating a core tenet of Oregon law and holding its meetings in secret and keeping people from having the opportunity to participate. And this limitation of 2 minutes and getting foreclosed from another meeting is just an example of how this process is being manipulated in a way to keep information away from the HAAB. And I would appreciate the opportunity to appear in person to present this information to you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I will go ahead and move to the next commenter in our queue. We have a phone number ending in 4524. We invite you, phone number ending in 4524, to make your verbal public comment at this time. You can unmute yourself by dialing *6. We cannot hear you at this moment. Phone number ending in 4524. Do you have a public comment? This might have been a duplicate I'm hearing. Okay, this was a duplicate of Mr. Courtright. Yes. Okay, that is all. That is all.
We thought we had 2 commenters, so I think I would be remiss if we didn't allow Mr. Courtright to finish his comment. Was that a duplicate?
I believe it was a duplicate, and that number has dropped off.
Okay. Hopefully, he'll continue to watch the meeting, and maybe there'll be an opportunity to hear further, as we thought there were 2 commenters for today. Any additional public, Natalie, that you can see?
Thanks, Erica. I cannot see any further public comment, so I think we are ready to continue.
All right, thank you. We can move to the next slide. Thank you to Mr. Courtright. And if there are others that we did not see to give public comment today, we appreciate your concern about the community, and we will definitely pass on any additional written comments, as we have in the past with other commenters, to our Historic Albina Advisory Board. With that, we're going to move forward in the agenda, and I'm excited to turn the meeting over to colleagues James McGrath and others from our Portland team, City of Portland colleagues, to talk about precedents and possibilities.
Thank you, Erica. And I think we're going to switch screen sharing technologies. So if Tiffany would share the Miro board, wonderful. So in our last meeting, which was in December, we covered, the design team covered a lot of really technical topics, including, and maybe Tiffany, you can zoom in, as we discussed, these are 2 graphics that we shared last time. We went into a lot of detail about the highway cover utilities, the structures, the girder layouts. We use these 2 exhibits primarily to step through what Megan reminded us of in her summary around, in the cyan and the drawing on the left, the cyan areas of the cover have a lighter carrying capacity, and in the orange areas, there's a heavier carrying capacity. And we stepped through that in some detail, and there was dialogue, and actually John Wolf from the engineering side of the design team will revisit this topic later in our meeting to go into some more detail about girder sizing and girder layouts. So really good stuff. We're happy to revisit that with you and take more time with it. But there's a whole other 2 chapters of the story that we didn't get a chance to talk about in December, and we want to make that the focus of our time today. And it's really, we framed it up as precedents and possibilities. So we'll be diving into those sort of examples of achieving the priorities that the HAAB has developed with the community, who has had success in developing projects that achieve those outcomes, And then what might that look like when they're applied in this place? What is possible on these covers? So this is sort of the balance to the technical details and the you can do this, you shouldn't do this, all of the stuff that we stepped through last time. This is the balance point to that. This is all of the things that might be possible and how they relate to the stated values that the HAAB has embraced, the community has developed. So we're going to start. We're going to embark on that journey. And Tiffany, if you could slide over and zoom into the diagram at the top right. As part of our work in the due diligence phase, where we've been doing the discovery and doing some of that early design that we've shared with you, that technical detail, we're also trying to have some larger level observations about this place. Not necessarily cultural observations, more built contexts, architectural and urban fabric observations, one of which is shown here really, really simply in these two colors. When we zoom out, the project area is right there in the middle. But when we zoom out, it's very clear that there are a couple of major land use patterns happening. In the magenta color, that purple color, there's a finer grained set of residential uses. This is sort of the neighborhood. This is a traditional neighborhood fabric with some larger institutional uses, but it tends to be quieter streets, smaller buildings. And yet in orange, also within the project area, is what we really understand as a major civic corridor that moves through the project area. Broadway, Weidler being really important streets in the identity of Portland and their link to the bridge. There's sort of these two very different character areas that exist on what will become the future cover areas. So Tiffany, if you zoom out, the same two colors appear when we go back to our cover area diagram. There is an area around Hancock Street and to the north that is really much more closely aligned with and related to that quieter streets, that neighborhood feel. It's proximate to it. It's the part of the covers that are related to that. And then there's the crosshairs of Broadway and Williams, where there is already existing commercial activity. There's a lot of the vehicular activity, the streetcar, the transit, all of those things are happening. And it's more of a commercial oriented part of the future cover parcels that are going to be created. And so we just wanted to start there and put that forward to you. We're not going to be making decisions today or really anytime soon about what precisely is going to happen on each of these parcels. But we think this is a reasonable place to start as we think about some of the possibilities. What are the uses, either in the long term or in the near term, that will find their best home in the area in orange around the commercial activity and all of both the foot traffic and the vehicular traffic, the active transportation and transit, versus what are those activities, those uses, those things we want to cultivate a little further to the north. So we think there's some natural breakpoint in the cover geography. And it helps us think about the kinds of activities and places and precedents that we might put in this place. So that we wanted to sort of get ourselves back into the game and put you back on the map. North is up. I think most of you have been working with us long enough to remember these drawings. Also rendered here, I think importantly, are some developments that are occurring now. So we see Albina 1 is rendered just sort of off the cover area, but on Flint, as well as the housing project to the, I think it's called Analog, to the north. We're trying to keep our exhibits contemporaneous. This is a dynamic place. Things are changing, and we're trying to reflect that and keep track of it in the drawings that we make. Okay, so that's just to get us reacquainted. What we want to do is talk to you about a series of projects that we have found nationally and some more locally, and we're calling them, it's a series of precedents. And we included these. We were hoping that we could have these in your binder. They are in your binder, but we haven't gotten that binder to you. There's sort of these 5, but there's also a lot more. There's a lot of examples. We'll step through a couple today, and I'll tell you why we selected them and why we're going to talk about them. These are projects that are happening further afield or locally that seem to respond and relate to the community values and priorities that we stepped through in our last HAAB meeting, and you've seen these many, many times before, around community cohesion, health, and wealth. And there's some very specific things around Black food independence and around daycare and culturally appropriate healthcare facilities. These are the community priorities that have emerged over time. They're not complete. We can continue to revisit these when we want to, but we use this as a guide to select projects that we would research and discuss, because they relate to these your stated priorities. These are we're going to step through 5 projects of different kinds that include open spaces, they include commercial incubator spaces, a whole series of things, some workforce training. But the goal of each of those projects is they have to be about Black space. They have to be either designed by Black designers or initiated and funded by Black developers, or about Black culture. So each one of them that we'll step through today should resonate. We hope that they will resonate in some ways. And we're going to ask you at the back end of this, which did you prefer and what are we missing? What more are we missing? Because we know we don't have the a complete view, and we'd love to enrich that with your perspective. So if I'm going to hand the mic over to Rachel Hoy, whom you've met from the City of Portland, and we've collaborated on this with the City of Portland. We'll step through, we'll take a moment on each of these, and then at the end of it, we'll talk a little bit more about how does all of this stuff and what's happening in the national practice, how does it relate to this place and what's possible? So with that, Rachel.
Thank you, James. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Rachel Hoy with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And I wanted to walk you through this first example. This is what's called a Sherman Phoenix Marketplace, and it's located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But there were some things that resonated with this example, as James has shared, that I really, after doing some research, it's become somewhat of a national model. So after this, I would be interested to hear if some of you have heard of this example, or in fact, maybe visited. So this project was in response to and created after civil unrest in Sherman Park, Milwaukee in 2016. And it was born out of a partnership between Joanne Saber, who is an experienced small business owner and leader in the Black community, and Julie Kaufman, a local real estate developer. So they developed what they called a co-mentorship model, which they basically combine their expertise, Joanne, her expertise in business, and Julie, her expertise in project development. And they, in combining and mentoring each other, they were able to find some strong tenants and hire local contractors, and then recruit neighborhood residents to directly invest in building this project. And in fact, to become owners, neighborhood residents to become owners to advance community wealth. And so a little bit about the statistics here on the slide. This is a 2-story building. It's approximately 11,000 square feet. It's a marketplace. There's a community event space. It has parking on site. It has an outdoor patio, has seating on the property, both indoor and out. The marketplace opened at 2 years after Joanne and Julie started this effort, opened in 2018. It's Black owned and operated, and 29 of the small businesses that are in the building, 96 are people of color, 63% are women owners and led businesses. And in addition to that, the Sherman Phoenix supports basically a whole group of entrepreneurs within the community, and they offer spaces for monthly pop-ups. So it's not just these 29 businesses, it really is a community effort. And the building in terms of some of the community members have commented and the board has commented, they have a really amazing website. I really enjoyed researching this particular example. The community cohesiveness that has developed around the different options that this marketplace offers, from retail options to wellness services, an on-site gallery, salons, a barber shop, counseling services. I mean, they're all in this space. It's a pretty amazing space. And the newest addition is they have a mentorship and coaching program, which is a recent addition and supports the businesses to continue to grow wealth, and support growing entrepreneurs with technical assistance opportunities within the community. So I will stop there. There's so much more I could say about this. I loved this example, but let's go to the next one, James.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. The next one is a project called Destination Crenshaw in Los Angeles. It's a interesting project on a number of levels. It's got about 100 different commissioned art pieces done and achieved by Black Los Angeles artists. It's sort of an outdoor museum. And I think one of the statements on their website is to create an unapologetically Black space in the heart of LA. It's related to a light rail project, but it is a community-driven initiative in the face of an infrastructure project. It's sort of the community's way of making the infrastructure project fit better and really deliver the goods when it comes to their own economic development ideas and their ownership of the space. The primary desire of the community group that led this was using the Black expression and Black art to create economic development and opportunity and identity. And it really seems to be working. This is now known in national circles as the way to do not just public art, but really to do community engagement and to build capacity in the community for some interesting work. We had the opportunity to talk to the project team that's been involved in this, and they're a resource to us. We can expose them to the team here. A really interesting space that I think harkens back to some of the conversations we had with you in the context of the early work packages. But how would we tell the arc of the story of the Black experience in Oregon and in Albina? And we were starting to lay out some markers in that story, some chapters of that story, for opportunities for the infrastructure to improve and tell part of the story, our Adinkra symbols, some of the signage on the bridges. But that story is not complete. And I think the main project area the highway covers, like Destination Crenshaw, can be a part of telling that story in a very beautiful and articulate way. With that, we'll keep moving. This is an example of an open space, obviously, but this is an example. Nicholas Starren from the city of Portland is going to talk about this one, and it's related to arts, but sort of indoors.
Greetings, good afternoon. Before I just dive into this, I'll just very briefly introduce myself. I'm Nicholas Starren from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, working with Rachel and the city team and the project team on this. And I have attended a few of the most recent HAAB meetings, but this is my first opportunity to actually speak with you. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to work on this project and working with the HAAB as we move forward. So the example on the slide before you, the precedent is the Stony Island Arts Bank. It's a 3-story, 20,000 square foot building on a 30,000 square foot site on the south side of Chicago. It's a repurposed building, adaptive reuse building that's been transformed into a hybrid space that houses contemporary and arts materials and archival activities. There are galleries, film screening spaces, and a library and archive focusing on Black arts and culture, with it really sort of an interesting array of collections ranging from the corporate records of like Jet and Ebony magazine all the way to record collections of, important Chicago scene house musicians. It's pretty interesting. But what really struck me and inspired me about this example wasn't so much the individual building and its use per se, but the organization that created it, the Rebuild Foundation, and the way that the Arts Bank complements the broader group of Black-centered arts and culture sites and programs that the foundation curates and owns and sponsors in Chicago. The foundation was created by a gentleman named Theaster Gates. I think that's how you pronounce his first name. By all accounts, a really inspiring artist and community leader. And the foundation is grounded in, three basic core values: Black people matter, Black spaces matter, and Black objects matter. The foundation operates a sort of growing constellation of sites in the South Side that collectively offer like a range of arts and culture projects and programs that support and present Black history and create creativity, while also helping to transform neighborhoods, sort of one project at a time. So in addition to just, to this arts bank, there's a housing collaborative that they own, which is like 32 residential units designed for working artists and their families that want to sort of immerse themselves in an art-centered environment. They have a restaurant and the Currency Exchange Cafe, which is a sort of combined restaurant, community space, and culinary incubator. They have an in-progress project called the Kenwood Gardens, which is like a multi-purpose open space that includes community gardens and public art. And they're working on a forthcoming arts incubator in a former school site. So for me, the takeaway of this presence, or a key takeaway, is that it shows how a small building and site, and one that could likely easily fit on or near our little cover here, can house important, programs and projects that are part of sort of a larger collection of complementary activities and sites. It's a piece of a larger vision and sort of a collective endeavor that's specifically aimed at urban reclamation and transformation of neighborhoods, while sort of clearly being led and grounded in the voices of the Black community and under sort of a collective vision. So with that, I'll pass it on to the next example.
Yeah, Amy Nagy from Prosper. It's going to talk about a local example.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amy Nagy. I'm a development manager with Prosper Portland. And we're highlighting Vanport Square as kind of a unique wealth building opportunity. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it over on MLK in Northeast Portland. This one is particularly unique, and wanted to highlight it because we talk a lot about wealth building, and typically through ownership, and that's usually through home ownership, business ownership. But this was a project where there was an opportunity to combine both business ownership with small property ownership. This was something that we, at the time, were known as the Portland Development Commission, now Prosper Portland. We partnered with two local African-American developers that many of you also know very, very well, Ray Leary and Gina Woolley, who then developed this project and delivered a series of commercial condos that were sold to small businesses that gave them an opportunity to not only be in the neighborhood, but work and own out of their space. Another kind of unique example of this or opportunity was around having the spaces more fully built out. And so this was, kind of reduced the need for an additional construction project. The project was done back in 2008, but it actually achieved LEED Gold standard at the time. It brought a high level of energy efficiency. And then it had this kind of unique financing structure, which we can get into in a separate time, but through new market tax credits, it actually enabled the business owners to purchase the spaces by providing affordable loans for that. All right, thanks.
Awesome, thank you. And a last one is another local example, and Tiffany Swift, who's been with us for the majority of our time working together, will present this one.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you again. So The Portland Community College Opportunity Center is located pretty close to us here in Cully, Northeast Portland. It just opened a few months ago in the fall of 2023. It was funded by a 2017 bond measure that voters approved to replace an aging workforce training center that PCC had operated for quite some time. This project also has some more innovative, newer sustainability features. It is a mass timber structural system, which you can see here. So instead of the traditional steel and concrete columns and beams, it uses mass timber. So it has lowered embodied carbon in the building, and it also features a high performance enclosure to lower energy consumption. But really why we're highlighting this project as a local example of the community wealth and community health programs that have shown up on that draft priority list. So this center, its mission is to transform lives through education and connections to family wage jobs. So it houses the Small Business Development Center, Oregon Department of Human Services, classrooms and meeting rooms. And in the future, there will be adjacent or affordable housing done by Home Forward just on the edge of this site. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out and they all interact. But the other part that we really wanted to highlight for this project is through a restorative justice lens, this project really strove to be value-centered from the beginning and throughout the process. So starting from the RFP looking for design consultants, they specified that, and throughout design, engagement, and decision-making process, they strove to really adhere to that. So the project was informed by two approaches by team members: the critical race spatial lens and design justice. And these are really multifaceted, interesting ways of thinking, and I'll just highlight just a bit of the approach. So the critical race spatial lens, this was the part that was part of the RFP, and that was really brought by team member Amara Perez. She is a local educator, facilitator, and researcher in Portland who's collaborated with PCC on a number of built and research projects, and with students as co-collaborators and co-researchers. And the critical race spatial lens has several tenets, and I'll just highlight a few. But the core one is that racism is embedded and ingrained in all aspects of society, including architecture, planning, and design. So starting from that, space is not neutral. Space is read all the time through our multiple identities and our lived experiences. So for PCC, that means that when they're designing new spaces on their campus, they're really paying close attention to how people will use these resources and services and how the design interacts with the success of all of the resources they're trying to put out there. So design justice was the other piece that was guiding this project, and that was really brought by team member Colocate, which is a nonprofit architecture firm located in New Orleans and also in Portland, founded by Black architect Brian Lee Jr. And design justice is really a complementary system of thinking, which seeks to create spaces of racial, social, and cultural justice through both the process and design outcomes itself, and also looks to challenge the power structures that have used architecture as a tool of oppression. So together, these two systems really led to a close focus on elevating the voices of communities of color in this design process. So there were trainings with the overall project team, a series of focus groups with the Black community members, with Indigenous youth and elders, with people with disabilities and others. And I think what's really unique about this project is that the insights that came out of the engagement process were documented in the actual construction documentation in the sheet set. So there were design justice specific sheets that called out recommendations both on physical aspects, policies, and programs. And this was all as an intent to keep the project as accountable as possible to the values that it stated throughout the process, because I think we all know that things change a lot in the design process, especially when you get into costing and construction. So this was really an attempt to focus on that. And in the pictures, a couple of the elements that surfaced in that engagement and design justice sheets was the way the outside was designed to have furnituring that was really inviting to people not specifically using the building in response to comments that the overall neighborhood needed more open space, and also the importance of the community room inside to be a really great resource for all kinds of community groups, and to really use the custom art in that space to elevate the diverse communities. So I think overall, this project was really interesting to us because it's so new, it's in town. We can talk to a lot of people who are deeply involved in it if we're interested in diving into other aspects of it. The sustainability is interesting, and it really would fit on the cover parcels as far as footprint and massing. And James is going to go into more examples of how these precedents that we've just talked about and the others could actually fit on our cover and our parcels.
Thanks, Tiffany. So just 5 examples in your binder. You'll probably find closer to 20, and these are the tip of the iceberg when it comes to, things happening around the country and in our community. We weren't trying to be exhaustive. Just make the connection between the priorities of the community and the developments and the projects and the buildings that bring those to life. So we presented 5. There's a bunch more that you'll get in your binder, but what we also wanted to do was take those examples and show you how they relate to this place. So here's some examples, and Tiffany will zoom in even further as we go. Here are some examples of either projects that we talked about today or that are in the binder when they are placed at the same scale as the drawing, when they're placed on the highway covers. And we're just trying to make the connection that these buildings and these programs and these uses are all within range of the sites and the parcels that we'll be creating on the covers and adjacent to the covers. And so maybe you could start up at the north. We didn't talk about north of Hancock on the left. We didn't talk about this building in particular, but the Pittman building is in your binder. It's a commercial kitchen building in the Central East Side. It has a particular relationship to a truck loading bay for it's essentially the commissary for a number of businesses around town. And lo and behold, it would fit perfectly on site 2A, which is one of the sites that's created north of Hancock. And it's at the same scale as site 2A has capacity to hold up. The PCC Fruit and Flower and Child Development Center is another example that you see. And we're just trying to make the point. We're not saying let's do that here. We're just saying these things fit. And remember, what today is about the sort of second half of the story. We spent December talking about some of the constraints and the technical challenges of making things happen. We wanted to balance that to show you that the decisions around the highway cover structure, the engineering of the structure, still enable a lot of the great things to happen that the community wants to have happen at the scale that fits on the covers, both in terms of its vertical scale and its horizontal scale. So maybe you could just scan around here, Tiffany, and then we can open it for dialogue. Here's a project that people may be aware of, Vanport Square. It's a really interesting community facility, would fit well. You obviously wouldn't design it precisely the way it's shown here, but it's approximately the scale of our major site 5 in the core area just north of Broadway. Albina 1 itself is a project just off to the left, but it's about the size of the parcel that will be acquired by the project on Broadway and be off the covers. And so we're just trying to make those connections for you. There's another building you'll see. There's a relatively new and small building in the Central East Side called the Framework Building. And that building is even smaller than our smallest parcel that's being created as part of this. So that we call that parcel 7. And that building was constructed within the last 5 years. And so there's other things happening, the development economics, the architecture, the structural systems. The industry is creating buildings that can fit on sites like these. The Sherman Phoenix is another example, a really packed house when it comes to all of the things Rachel was sharing with us. And yet it happens on essentially a half block in Portland. And so that could either happen off cover or on cover. The point is, it fits. There's some other interesting precedents that you'll see in the binder around open space and streetscapes. This thing right here in the middle is called Pop Courts. I think it's in Chicago. It's essentially an empty lot that was repurposed and expanded out into the street to create active play space. So those are the connections we're trying to make for you. in an effort to inform you about the structural engineering's decisions can still accommodate and achieve a lot of these goals. So here's another example. We looked at the National Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta, and we thought when we first saw the example that it was a massive facility, and lo and behold, it actually would fit on one of our parcel sites. So it is a national level museum and center, but its architectural expression isn't out of place on the sites that we have here before us. So with that, maybe I'd ask Tiffany to zoom back out. We always cover a lot. We try to be brief. It is complicated, but we talked about the district, we talked about some precedents, and we talked about how those precedents could apply in place. I know we might explore a Menti activity after this, but it's probably wise to open it for some dialogue. Would you agree, Erica?
Indeed. Indeed. I'd love the opportunity to ask HAAB members if they have specific thoughts in regards to what they just heard, in regards to the precedents and possibilities regarding the proposed highway cover design. I'll be looking for your virtual hands if you have a thought, comment, or question. I see Kobe's hand.
Yeah, thank you. This is Kobe Lewis, CEO of Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon. With all these different ideas, are we going to do any exploration and kind of narrow it down to maybe like the top 10? Are we asking community members like what they might want, or what's the decisioning process for us getting kind of narrowing down our actual list? Because these are some great examples, and it's great to see them diagrams. It just makes more sense that way, thinking about spacing. But you know, how do we take these great ones and narrow it down to something we actually have to make a decision about?
Indeed. Thanks for your question. I think that's a combination answer between the Rose Quarter Project and our partners and colleagues at the City of Portland, as the infrastructure project is building the foundation, and then we'll be working with our city partners as we think about what governance and spaces. So I'll open the floor maybe for either Megan and Rachel, or potentially Patricia, to offer some comment here.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. I can jump in. Kobe, the great question. And I'll just say we have time to define the uses on top. Really, where we are in the process right now is we are laying out the 30% design, so the preliminary design for the highway cover structure. But as we're making decisions around like the actual physical, cover that will be over I-5 and the space that it creates, we want to make sure that we're building it in a way that is supporting potential future development uses and kind of those range of uses. So really for the next year and a half, we're going to be in more of a range of use conversation as we're working through the 30% design. And then the city, as the land use authority for City of Portland, will be really taking charge on kind of the future development of what eventually will go on top. But that's a future conversation. And so I don't know if someone from the city wants to step in and address that piece, but we have lots of time.
Hi, good afternoon. Rachel, please go ahead. Yeah, I was just looking for my mute button. Feel free to go ahead and I'll supplement as needed.
This will just be really quick, Patricia. And so I would just to add on to that is that, I think that this is just a real opportunity when we look at these types of example projects and precedents from around the country. It's a good time to think about what's missing. Are there things here? Are there types of uses or businesses that you could be thinking of? Other examples that you all know, have members of that you would like us to explore further? And I mean, to Megan's point, this is the time to think about not just expand upon maybe the uses that maybe we haven't hit on yet that you would like us to explore more, but also to maybe think about it helps us think about then in terms of the cover itself and what can be accommodated, and then think about also the adjacent parcels, which we didn't talk about so much today, but this was really to look at the cover itself and then to think about also some of the adjacent parcels. And the examples we really raised are today and shared are from open space to commercial and retail community resources and options that can take place on the cover. There's other examples you'll see in your binder that look at residential opportunities that probably are more appropriate on the adjacent parcels. So again, this is just the beginning of thinking about some of these uses and an opportunity to hear more from you about, are there other examples that you would like us to look at, or things that we might be missing at this point?
Good afternoon, everyone. I might just add a little bit. Patricia Diefender for she, her pronouns with the City of Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I think what everyone else has said is exactly right. And I would only add one other kind of observation, which is to say that one of the objectives with showing some of these precedent examples is just to show that we're talking a lot. We're getting into a lot of technical detail about the cover as a structure, and what their constraints are and what the structure can hold in terms of building and uses. And we just wanted to demonstrate, I think, provide a visual of some real tangible examples so that the HAAB members and the community at large can start to see what is actually feasible on the sites, and how much of this the HAABs and the community's priorities for different kinds of uses and the type of placemaking that is envisioned here, how that really can be accomplished on the cover. And these examples are I think a way of demonstrating that. So that's really trying to make it a little less technical and abstract and a little more concrete. So we would love to hear your impressions about not just the range of uses, but also just the structures themselves and the possibilities that they kind of offer. So that's all I had to add to the.
Thanks, Patricia.
Sure.
So just to make sure, Kobe, there will be an extensive engagement process continuing to leverage this group, the HAAB, and I'm sure other community to settle in on what those priorities are and finalize those as we move further into the future. So, Mr. Edwards, I see your hand.
Thank you very much. I guess when I look at this, I would hope that we would have a variety of buildings that would not be cookie cutter. We're a multifaceted community, and we need to have a multifaceted complex here. Something might be focusing on our music history. Something might be focused on our social history. Something might be focused on our civil rights history. There's a lot of different facets that we make up, and those are just a few. And so I would hope that these buildings would be looked at and built where they fit. And also there's some connectivity to it as well, because even though we're multifaceted, we're one community, and that should be expressed in whatever we're going to end up with at the end of the day. Because otherwise, I think we lose some identity, and that's what we want to make sure that we hold on to. Our identity is not compromised. Our identity is out front, so everyone can see and know our history and know where we're going.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I just want to reiterate and remind you all, the binders that we're referring to is a resource for you all to dive into. There is an online version that is available to you and members of the public. Those physical binders, we were slowed down by the weather and the snow and ice. And so I'll be arranging a time for some connection and drop off to you to make sure that you have those in hand. But there is an online version available on the website for you as well. James, was there anything else? I wonder if we move to James?
We're good to move on.
Indeed. Natalie, if you and Isabel will share on the screen, we're going to test one more time our Menti engagement tool in regards to the elements of the precedents which excite you the most. We know that there are several that you'll have an opportunity to see, whether online or in your binders. But based on the 5 that were presented today, we're hoping you would reopen the Menti link that is in the chat for you, and that you would identify, just based on the 5 that you saw today, which of those creates a passion for you, something that stood out to you in regards to the Sherman Phoenix or Destination Crenshaw in regards to arts, also Stony Island in Chicago, Vanport Square, or the PCC Opportunity Center. So if HAAB members would take an opportunity, look at that, to show us what they're thinking in regards to what excites you about what you heard, those 5 that you heard today. Mr. Washington, while we're doing that, I see your hand. Please feel free to unmute and chime in.
Good afternoon. This is John Washington. I'm the Executive Director of the Seoul District Business Association.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I get a little bit uncomfortable when I'm led like this. You know, and I agree with both people, with Kobe and Doc over here about the perceptions. You know, but the history of this is that somehow, and I've seen these exercises before, I keep feeling like I'm being led somewhere. Okay, I got my own ideas. You know, we are a community. We got ideas of our own. Why do I have to engage in selecting one of these? Do I have to look at this? You know, so anyway, I'm just uncomfortable. Do I have to pick one of these?
You absolutely do not today. It's just to teach us
Okay.
how to use the Mentimeter. It's not
to use the meter. Oh, gotcha. Okay,
Yes.
As long as we're learning something other than just about all these, because there's other projects that are around the country too that they missed.
I apologize
that
if
are
I was
even,
not clear, but no.
Yeah, okay.
This is
All right,
just
yeah,
to
all right.
teach us to use the Mentimeter. This is not ranking. This is not deciding. This is saying, based on today, just to teach us to use the Mentimeter. It's just an engagement tool. We want to give you all some practice in it. So I apologize if I wasn't clear, Mr. Washington.
Thank you, there.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for participating. We want just to have some other ways as we're meeting virtually to engage on topics. And so this is just, this is playful today and fun. This is not making any decision. All right. If we could go to the next slide, Mr. Posey, I see your hand.
Yeah, I didn't want to stop the presentation. I've been having some technical difficulties.
Understood.
But I do have some questions or I don't know where we are in the process, but I was off and then I'm back on now. So is this appropriate to ask a question now?
Absolutely.
Well, the only, you know, my piece on these projects is that you all have researched is what wealth capacity is built into these projects. You know, they all look pretty to me, but is any money going to be made from, and how does that fit into the overall plan to build wealth in the community? I know Vanport Plaza, they were vacant for a minute up in there, you know. So is Prosper Portland making an evaluation about whether or not this is going to fit into the economic wherewithal for these communities, and can we put a number on them? What are these projects going to do in terms of generating jobs and building capacity, skills, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Is anybody looking at that? They all look pretty now. They all look pretty. They all look pretty.
Indeed. Any comments from our colleagues at Prosper? Amy, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, happy to weigh in here. I think it's a great question, Mr. Posey, and I know that, and it's something that we're continuing to work to, I think, through the process. One thing we were going to share as a follow-up in the kind of we heard you segment of the meeting, but I think I'll just preview it a little bit, is part of, while we're looking at kind of what could be types of projects that are interesting, different ownership opportunities. To your point, there's considerations around ownership versus leasing. There's an additional inherent risk around somebody owning a space, but the moment here is just sharing out. Here's what some of the possibilities are. I'd love to hear also, as we continue the conversation, from Mr. Washington, what are the other projects that he's seen that he would love to kind of throw into this mix. But in addition to that, we're bringing on folks from Echo Northwest to help us with the economic analysis portion of the project. We're going to hear more from them coming in the next couple of months. But part of that is what they're going to be doing is looking at kind of the criteria for prioritizing not only the sites that are available on and off cover, but thinking about what are those development scenarios, right? And adding, and to your point, putting some numbers to those in terms of what it takes to make those financially feasible. And then what we can do also as part of reconnecting communities, that kind of extension, is looking at what are those kind of wealth building job opportunities that come out of those different types of uses, to start to give context about the people you all living in the area as the project comes together. Also taking into account, I just want to note, from kind of everything from development through design, construction, and then the folks that are actually working in, operating, living in a building.
Thank you, Amy. All right. With that, if you all could, thank you, Teresa. We're going to shift. You all asked some very interesting questions and I see your hand, Mr. Washington. I'll come back to you in just a moment. You all had some interesting questions, thoughtful, and the technical team and the project team has taken a deep dive into responding to the questions that you all asked. So if you'll give me just a moment, Mr. Washington, I'm going to let them jump in and then I will come back to your hand. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the technical team and John Wolf.
I think I might be jumping in here first.
Okay, thanks
for an overview. So as I mentioned kind of at the top of the meeting tonight, namely, just want to continue to thank the HAAB for your insights and thoughtful questions around all of these topics. We've got governance, we've got economic development, we've got girder sizing, air quality, right-of-way process were kind of the key themes that we heard from last meeting and questions. And so while we don't have complete answers on all of these topics tonight, we wanted to at least make sure that we were providing you an update on the status of each of these that were identified. You'll hear from John Wolf in just a moment here. The focus of the conversation is going to be on the highway cover, structural, kind of the technical design, or what we call that girder sizing, and really revisiting the discussion from December and then building on the information specifically to share out more on the key question that we got around, design assumptions and the considerations and sort of how we got to those assumptions and considerations. And so just a note as we're going into all of this work, while a technical lens is definitely used as we're looking at the design. We're also considering the project values, including restorative justice as we're going through this. So you saw that kind of through the precedents and possibilities that were just shared. We're considering partnerships. We're considering what's the project schedule. We're considering the financial resources. And on the topic of financial resources, I just want to note kind of one factor that is outside of the project team's control that we are working within, and that's that we have to be especially mindful of the constitutional requirement for state highway dollars to be used solely for the purpose of transportation. And so while we are building the highway cover and the highway cover kind of in the design of more of the 3-story building capacity in the center, fulfills the purpose of transportation, going beyond that gets beyond just the basic kind of transportation infrastructure. And so we'll touch on this in more detail as we get into the girder sizing discussion for the highway cover structure, and as it relates to the project and the highway cover. But again, just wanted to kind of create a funding and color of money foundation understanding that will continue through our conversation as we're looking at what are the technical trade-offs, what are, again, the cost trade-offs, what are the partnership requirements, schedule, and then our project values and restorative justice too. So all of that is playing together, but just wanted to make that note before we dive in. So with that, now I think I'm turning it over to John for the design update.
And give me just a moment before we move in. I see your hand, Mr. Posey. Mr. Washington, did you have a question that related to the last update?
Yes. Is this process of development on the covers, or is it going to be the traditional process that the city does with Prosper being in control of the development, since it does fall under retail or business, the type of building structure? It would fall under Prosper in the city, right, to develop these things?
Amy, are you going to chime in?
I was gonna come on with that if that's okay.
Sure.
So the answer is no, Mr. Washington. The plan is to get us to that 30% is to work with you all to show what types of development would be possible on the parcels that are available. We'd also take it through to what are some of the governance structure that was highlighted in terms of one of the HAAB priorities, right? Of who's going to actually own and control the land. So ODOT will continue to always own the facility, right? They'll actually own the cover. But then it was our understanding that the HAAB had the desire to have an entity from community that would actually work with ODOT to redevelop. So we're happy to be a part of supporting the redevelopment, but there's not a plan right now for Prosper Portland to ever take control of the parcels and then work with community. It would be more of a direct relationship.
All right, thank you for that.
Sure.
Mr. Posey, did you have a question before we move into the next piece?
Yeah, so I've got to go to another meeting, but
Yes,
I just want to, I don't want it to slip past us. Joe Courtwright, who was on the testimony before, I mean, I just got a portion of what he was saying, but he makes good points. You know, I'm just going to be real clear. I don't want to be chasing no rabbits working on this I-5, and they spending money everywhere except for the I-5, and everything gets built, Interstate build, Abernathy, and everybody else. And we run up here trying to act like we're going to build an I-5 project, and they shifting the money everywhere except for where we are spending our time and energy. So I would like to see ODOT address everything that Joe Cartwright said and give a rebuttal to it, so we can have a clear, distinct understanding of what his objections are, and we can have full transparency about where we're going and how we're doing. This political piece that he threw out there is something that's been under my crawl from the time I got on this committee. We need to get all these questions answered before, you know, we go forward on all these little cute designs and stuff. I don't want to belittle the work that people were doing, but to me, the substance of getting this project built is still fuzzy. Still not. I don't feel comfortable with it. I'm just being real honest with y'all. So please answer Mr. Cartwright's you know, statements about where we are on this I-5 project. I still don't know where we are, what we're doing for real.
Thank you, Mr. Posey. I know we have note of that, and our Rose Quarter team will be happy to help respond to that. With that, John Wolf, you have the pleasure of presenting and moving us forward this section.
All right, thank you, Erica. Yeah, John Wolf with the design team, and I've been leading the technical evaluation of the highway cover. I've got about 10 slides today to share with you in relation to a few questions that came up in our discussions in December, where we explored some of the technical considerations and specifically discussions about highway cover capacity and some of the highway cover offsets that might influence building placements. Next slide. So from our work session in December, really 2 questions were asked. There was asked for additional context on, we referred to it as the BT60 girder size, and how was that identified as the initial concept for the bridge design. And a follow-up to that was what adjustments would be needed, or what would be needed to accommodate larger capacity on the cover, additional capacity, larger scale development. So we've got a few slides to highlight some of these considerations and respond to that. So next slide, please. So first off, I'm going to address the girder type. In bridge design, concrete girders are very common for a number of reasons. One is they're economical. Second is they're relatively easy in terms of speed and ease of construction. And they're really the workhorse of the bridge industry. They can be designed with a very large strength to depth ratio, which is what we're really monitoring with this project, trying to get the most out of our capacity with minimal depth to the bridge, and also have a low life cycle cost. Next slide. Some of those points specific to the Rose Quarter project, we have to reconstruct these bridges over I-5, and this particular girder type allows us to do that with minimum disruption to traffic. Because of the scale of the cover and the repetitive construction techniques, these are very economical strategies for our highway cover. And as I mentioned, they're very effective in terms of the capacity and strength versus depth for our cover. And then there's also an opportunity to kind of optimize the design by increasing concrete strength and your reinforcing steel, which our project is assumed to be implemented. And then lastly, as we've worked with our CMGC contractor, getting their feedback along the way, validating all of these points, as well as some construction means and methods of setting these girders side by side, provides some additional efficiency for the contractor to eliminate false work. So lots of points indicating these being a very effective tool for the highway cover itself in achieving some of our goals. Next slide. And then we've talked a lot about considerations and constraints. And so some of the things we've explored as a project team is understanding how we're going to build, construct this highway cover, reconnecting that space across I-5. And we have some physical and topographic limits to our project. So on both the north and south end, there's existing bridges or viaducts on I-5 that influence the grade and tie-in points to our I-5 roadway. And we also have a number of local streets reconnecting across the top of the highway cover that we're trying to match into and minimize the impacts adjacent to the highway cover. So we have fixed points at the edges. We have controlling factors above the highway cover, and then we have to create the clearance envelope for the movement of freight and goods along I-5. So this graphic is really pointing to some of those considerations and constraints on the corridor. On the north end, drawing your attention to Flint Avenue and its intersection with Hancock Street. And then towards the south end, or the right side of your screen, Weidler Street is really influencing and controlling some of our clearances of the cover. The next slide. So now kind of showing similar information, but in a vertical profile view. So as you go from left to right, that's north to south. And again, highlighting on the left of your screen, that fixed point of the Elliott Viaduct really influences a lot of the cover design. There is a limit to how much we can modify or influence the grade of the freeway. And as we transition from that existing Elliott Viaduct elevation into our highway cover, it's also the deeper part of the bridge itself because of the openings and stands needed to create space for the ramp connections. And then a little bit also to the left of your screen, you can see some of the local streets as they cross the highway cover, being Flint and Hancock in particular. They're really trying to drape across the highway cover and match back into the existing conditions on either end. And those really control just how big of an opening we're able to create as we navigate through the highway cover. As you move further to the right of your screen, you can see the freeway is being lowered through the highway cover itself. Current design is lowering that grade approximately 3 to 4 feet. But we again start to get another controlling point on the south edge at Weidler, where the street is reconnecting. The road is on a cross slope as it comes through a horizontal curve. And again, we start to transition back to the fixed point at the Multnomah Street Viaduct on the south end of our project. So this is just providing some context and relationship to the design as it is currently configured and some of these considerations as we've looked at the highway cover itself, and really centering back on trying to create a connected highway cover environment where we're not creating a vertical disruption or discontinuity between the cover itself and the adjacent properties and lands has really been a guiding factor, trying to minimize how much anything would have to be raised to accommodate the cover. If we go to the next slide, this kind of just summarizes and recaps, the BT60 girder as the initial highway cover bridge girder assumption does provide the capacity to carry those local street loads. It has the potential to still accommodate up to a 3-story building from a capacity perspective. And as we talked through a little bit in the precedent section, we've identified as a team a lot of interesting and exciting opportunities that could be compatible with some of these considerations the team has investigated. So that takes us through how did we get to the BT60 girder. If we go to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about what the question of what would it take to increase the capacity, increase the potential for the highway cover to support increased loads. So as I walked through some of that vertical profile and those constraints, what we've found is that as you increase the depth of the highway cover, it has an impact on the connecting grades and elevations to those streets around it. And so with there being a limit to how much we can influence the freeway grade, if that was to be increased for the length of the cover, it would require raising of the cover itself and impacting some of the local streets, as well as increasing some of the impacts to properties around the cover itself. And then as Megan had mentioned, there's an impacting cost. And so there's some influences and factors related to adding cost, whether that be through changing grade or upsizing the bridge girders and members themselves that could not be funded through transportation funds. Next slide. With that being said, we wanted to come back and report out what it would mean to explore a deeper highway cover in terms of feasibility and context related to grades and the potential that it might hold from a development and capacity perspective. This graphic, really the figures in orange are highlighting that if we were to explore modifying the grades, there is an impact to doing that. And so increasing that girder size from north of Hancock to the south end of the cover would require both raising and lowering of those grades, as I mentioned. Eric, I'll pause to see, do we want to try and take a question or go through a few more slides?
I think we can move forward. It looks like, yes, we're going to wait until the end.
Is it? Okay. Okay. And I think there's just 3 more slides to go through. So we looked at what would it mean, or what would the influence be of increasing that depth for the length of the cover. As I noted, that Flint and Hancock connection, that intersection, is really influencing our ability to navigate that change in bridge depth only through the freeway profile. It's a little bit difficult to tell from this graphic alone because it's at the freeway center line, but as you get closer to the edges, those streets intersect, and it requires raising of the profile and local streets themselves, as well as lowering of I-5. And so this is just highlighting kind of that deeper vertical envelope, as well as some changes that would be needed to be made both to local streets and the freeway itself. Next slide is really meant to illustrate that there is varying orders of magnitude of impact depending on where you would look to modify the structural depth. And so in this slide, the project team looked at what would the influence be if the structural depth was only increased for a portion of that cover, where some of those constraints are less influential. And so we looked at, is there a portion of the cover that would not require raising of the local streets and could be achieved through freeway profile changes alone? And as we investigated that, there's a section between Hancock Street and Weidler Street that we'll show in a plan view on the next slide that has the potential for that deeper envelope. And the implications would be from a grade and connectivity with the local streets, it would be isolated to just the freeway profile. So this is showing a portion that could be addressed just through freeway profile changes. It does come with some other trade-offs and implications potentially as well beyond grade, but this is really just showing that section and some of the considerations. We go to the next slide, and there's just 2 more, I believe. This is just showing that same type of information in plan view. So on the point number 1 on the far north end, a deeper structure is really not feasible or viable because we're so close in proximity to that existing bridge and the Elliott Viaduct on the north end. We can't transition quickly enough without a significant raising of the cover and having implications to the connections on Flint. Area number 2, showing that area in orange. If that entire area structure was to be increased in depth, it would have an implication of both raising the cover and lowering the freeway, which would have some of the implications we just highlighted. And then area number 3, if it was only in a portion, that could be accomplished through freeway profile and not have an impact on the profile above. Again, there's a number of considerations and trade-offs that still come with that. But in terms of profiles, grades, and compatibility with the adjacent parcels, that area does look like it has an influence to just the freeway profile. And the next slide really is just summarizing a lot of what I just covered. You know, as we as previously shared, the portion through the middle of the highway cover has the potential to accommodate that 3-story building. But looking to expand beyond that would have implications to the local street connections as well as the freeway profile. If it was more isolated to a specific region of the cover, it may be accomplished just through the profile itself. But both of those options would have a number of trade-offs and considerations that would have to be further investigated in a deeper dive beyond this initial study that we've undertaken here to respond to this question. I think that's good place to pause for questions, Erica.
Indeed. Sprinna, I saw your hand. I'll go to you first.
Yeah, actually, my question was going to be what I'm hoping is this next part around air quality and environmental impacts and public health. So I'll just wait to see if it's answered and how we address it. And then if we don't, then I'll come back to it. Thank you.
Don, I don't see any other hands at this time. So if you wanted to move into that, we can take some questions at the end.
Okay, great. And if you want to go to the next slide, pretty straightforward. This is just going to be a brief follow-up on some of the questions that came up during our last conversation in December. Really reporting back what we've done, what we know, and kind of a high level what we're planning to do. So related to this topic, there were really two categories. There was the tunnel ventilation itself, and then air quality on or around the highway cover. So speaking first to tunnel ventilation, because of the requirements for fire life safety, so thinking of that in terms of incident response or in the event of a potential fire in the tunnel, which is a design criteria we have to consider, there will be ventilation and active fans within the cover itself to respond to that type of incident. I think that there was a follow-up to that asking about, will there be any vertical ventilation being considered? So think of this as ventilation through the cover itself to allow for either that emergency ventilation or just for passive movements of air within the tunnel. Due to our tunnel length, we do not anticipate the need for that, nor are we planning on that. That is typically something that would be explored in a much longer tunnel. Some of the examples would be, some of the 1.5 mile long and beyond tunnels. So that's not anticipated in our condition. And also related to the fans and ventilation, due to the tunnel length, we don't anticipate the need for those fans to operate at any given time to create airflow or movement during standard operations. So I'll preface all of this information I'm sharing is really intended to be just a quick update on these topics. These are topics that we do anticipate as we get into the design phase to bring back to this group and continue to report out and seek input on some of the assumptions that are informing design. The second half of this is related to air quality. So again, just a quick update on that and a follow-up to some of the conversations from last month. First off, thanks to the HAAB group and JT for sharing that article on the Colorado cover example. As we looked into that a little bit more, really to summarize that article and what was done was there was some high-level spot measurements that were done kind of related to the same topic. What is the influence of the highway cover and air quality? And really what they did in that article was looked at taking a measurement at the edges of the cover, the middle of the cover, and some distance away to try and understand, is there a relationship to proximity that has an effect on air quality. It was a relatively small scale investigation. Generally what they found was at the edges, the air quality levels were somewhat degraded as compared to towards the middle. And in the middle of the cover, it was relatively comparable to the measurements they took about 1/4 mile from the cover itself. What they caveated and what we continue to discover is this is a very complex and dynamic factor. It's multifactorial in the sense that it's not just proximity to the freeway, but there are factors such as topography, airflow and movements, relation to other potential pollutants that influence those numbers. But generally, it is in line with kind of the industry understanding that the closer to the freeway you are, generally the higher the level of particulates and pollutants, and the further you are those levels go down. So moving into a little bit of what we're planning to do, the project is already looking to implement some of these best management practices related to air quality and creating buffers around the freeway where possible. And so some of those best practices include looking at vegetative screening, looking at walls or other methods to create a buffer and really influence and deflect that influence from the freeway pollutants. And so that's something we've anticipated undertaking. We've already started to look at places and opportunities where those buffers could be implemented, but it'll be something we continue to look at and explore during the design phase, as well as exploring other best practices. What are some other things we're learning from peer exchanges, both through the industry and through other DOTs, where this has been a topic of further study and investigations, and continuing to report back to this group on what we find. So again, this is kind of a high level update of what we know, where we stand today, with an anticipation that this will be a topic we continue to revisit with this group.
Thanks, John. Sprinna, did you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I appreciate that, John. And it sounds like, if I had to summarize it, it's in progress. I think one of the things that I would like to see is just some more clarity on when the deep dive meeting will be. For us to go into this, I'd really like to have a meeting just designated to talking about public health and how we're going to deal with the pollution. You mentioned that you're looking at the vegetative screenings. I'd love to see more of that. Can you send us some data, some information, so that we can read up on our own to understand what's being looked at? Who are these people that are creating these best practices? Who are the peers that you're exchanging with, that you're working alongside? I'd love to know who on the project team is doing that work specifically as well. So I would just like a little bit more data and information, and I'd love to have a meeting just designated for us to specifically look and address these public health things, just like we just did with regard to looking at that BT columns or supports.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sprinna. And forgive me if my information is incorrect, but I believe Marianne was working with the team and the design team around some of that. James, is that correct?
Yep, I would submit that it's a multi-pronged effort. There's the natural materials that can help, and then there might be some more structural and mechanical things that can help.
Indeed. Other questions from HAAB members in regards to the information that John just shared? Mr. Modica, I see your hand.
Thank you. Happy New Year to everyone. A couple of questions for Mr. Wolf. It sounds like the project's funding is limited to what's allowed for highway construction. Does that take into consideration future light rail or fast rail alignment? And you know, would that be a way to get the increased capacity? I'm a fan of overbuilding, but I'm not a fan of things like ramps to nowhere that we see coming off of the I-5-405, which I consider to be historically an overbuild. And then it's like, oops, we can't do it or we can't fund it. But I think it's critical for us to consider how much of an overbuild will be necessary for increased public transportation and other needs. And also the girder type that you reference. I understand it's probably easier to replace should there be some type of catastrophic failure, like we saw in Philadelphia or in Los Angeles with regard to fire or seismic, but maybe you could expand on that, or at least make that top of mind for further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Modica. Any other questions before I shift to Megan? Seeing none, thank you, John. I'm going to turn it over to Megan to give an update regarding, you all asked a question in regards to property acquisition. So Megan, to you.
Yep. So yeah, at our last meeting, we were asked for an update on kind of the right-of-way process or property acquisition update. Just as a note, kind of where we are in process. So we're still in the environmental and preliminary design phases. And so the environmental document or the supplemental environmental assessment, it documents what we know as the anticipated property impacts for the project. And so pending the final environmental decision from our federal partners at Federal Highway Administration, that will really dictate what the specific right-of-way impacts would be, further kind of clarified in the final design phase. And so generally speaking, a property may be identified for permanent acquisition in environmental documents based on how it would be used for the project. So these considerations take into account like whether demolition or other modifications to the property are really needed to facilitate staging for construction or the actual construction of the project, or whether part of the project will be constructed on an impacted property. And then we also look at, what's the anticipated length of time that that property impact would be relative to the project's construction. So we're still in the preliminary identification phase of those properties. What we do know is that there's no residential buildings that are impacted by the project. And we have done initial reach out to all of the potentially affected property owners. And I think this was specifically the question of kind of what has the disposition of the conversations been. So just letting everyone know that we've done those reach out, letting them know of the potential impact to their property. However, because we don't have a final environmental decision from our federal partners, nor do we have secured right-of-way or construction dollars at this time, there's really no further conversation around making offers to property owners at this time. We're still in that kind of potential identification phase. So that's what I'm able to share with you right now, where we are in the process. I'm happy to continue to bring this topic up if it's still of interest to the HAAB as we know more and as I can provide updates along the way. But just wanted to make sure there was a touch point there.
Thank you. Leslie, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just want to say, this was my question, and I appreciate the response, Megan, and the review. I guess I'm still concerned that, as we know, that when people find out that government is looking to purchase property for whatever reason, the price is always increased. And so just to be mindful, is the ODOT, do they pay market value? Is it whatever the seller wants to sell it for? And I know you said that you guys aren't quite at that spot, but I'm just concerned about continuing. We already in a situation where costs are increasing, and then to have to buy property from folks. And I don't want to cheat anybody. I don't want us to do eminent domain or take property away from people. But just concerned about continuing cost escalation as we move through this process. And I would appreciate this as a regular part of the update for us when we meet.
Sure. Thanks for that clarification, Leslie. And I can definitely kind of keep bringing updates along that way. And to your point, like first and foremost, ODOT wants to make sure that we're doing a fair and equitable approach as we're working with the different private property owners on this. But yeah, I'll add this to the notes to keep tabs on and bring back to you all as we know more.
Thank you, Megan. As we shift into kind of our next steps, I'm gonna shift back to Megan really quickly to share about our upcoming meetings, and then I'll have some closing thoughts before we end our time today. Megan?
Yeah, thanks, Erica. So for next steps, I know planning out for some of our future meetings are going to be spaces where have members who have invited guests that will be attending. I know conversations to date have been talking about 2 separate meetings, one in February and one in March. sort of in light of being efficient with your time, with your guests' time, and the time we need for our project team, we actually are going to combine the February and March sessions into one. So instead of sort of two shorter sessions, we'll be doing a single longer session in March. So looking likely to about a 3-hour session, and that'll allow really a bigger picture to be told in one meeting. And so hopefully that we see that as being more effective and efficient with your time. So note that the February touch points will not be happening, but we'll have a robust touch point in March for our next meeting. That will be a virtual meeting as well, and we'll be reaching out with more details, and specifically, I think, reaching out with a survey to have members to see, does it make sense to extend the time to be a later meeting or to start earlier? We want to see what works best with the group. So I'll pause there, and Erica, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So be on the lookout for that. We need to know from you all. We know that many of you serve in several capacities within the community and have a lot of responsibilities, even outside of your personal lives with work and different organizations you serve on. So we want to make sure that we are utilizing and being respectful of your time. So please be looking out for that kind of survey to help us determine the best time for March, as well as the guests. Thank you to you all who have stepped in and helped to identify additional members of the historic Albina community who will be joining in this conversation in March. I want to reiterate that the binder reference information is available online, not just to HAAB members, but it is on the project website. And I will be communicating, as I do often, with all of you personally to find a time to make an exchange for that personal physical binder. So be on the lookout for that. I also want to again remind those in the virtual space from our community that notes from our meetings can be found on the project website, at the Rose Quarter website, at events-meetings. So please avail yourself to all of the information. We have established a value of being transparent, and you have access to that information and the discussions that we've had within the community and in regards to the Rose Quarter project. So I wanted to take the opportunity to encourage you all to avail yourselves to that. I know several of you may be participating in the meeting later this evening. So thank you so much for your time and commitment to the Rose Quarter project. I look forward to us diving deeper and to broadening our engagement with the historic Albina community and other Black leaders in the community around the potential possibilities, precedents, governance, and all of the things necessary to make sure that there definitely is a restorative benefit to this infrastructure project and opportunity and the building of the potential highway cover. With that, thank you for your time. Have a wonderful evening. I will be communicating via text, phone, and email, and we will see you all in March.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.